share my screen.
Thank you for putting that on about my friend's son.
You're welcome.
Okay, here we go. Parsha Unpacked this week is Parsha Tzav, and it's also something known as Shabbos HaGadol, which we will discuss a little bit at the end. So there's a lot of beautiful things I want to share with you over here. So we'll just jump right in. Parsha Tzav. It's the second Parsha in the book of Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus. Also really primarily dealing with the topic of last week, which is, which is karbanos, sacrifices. And the Parsha starts off by talking about a fire that must remain burning on the altar, on the Mizbeach at all times. So the verse says, command Aaron, Tzav es Aaron. That's where the Parsha gets its name from. Tzav, it's command Aaron, that's Moshe's brother, and his sons, the Kohanim, and say to them, this is the ritual of the burnt offering. The burnt offering itself shall remain where it is burned upon the altar all night until the morning, meaning when you bring this particular sacrifice called the Corbin Toda, the burnt offering, the reason why it's called the burnt offering is because it burns all night long on the altar, on the Mizbeach, until the morning. And here's the key thing that I want to focus on. While the fire on the altar must keep going on it, that fire cannot go out. And in a couple of verses later, it says it more explicitly. The fire on the altar, you have this big area, which is a large area where the sacrifices were being burned on top of the altar. That fire shall be kept burning, not to go out. Every morning the priest shall feed wood to it, lay out the burnt offering on it, turn it into smoke. Okay, again, a perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. So what is the idea? What's the message? What's the symbolism of this fire, which is, if you will, it's a ner tamid. It's an eish tamid. It's a constant burning fire on the altar. So a very interesting question is, why is this particular law, this particular rule of the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, or the temporary temple known as the Mishkan, why is this particular rule mentioned here specifically? It could have really been mentioned anywhere. It could have been mentioned earlier when we talked about building the altar. It could have been mentioned in connection with any one of the karbanot, with any one of the sacrifices, but for some reason it's mentioned specifically over here in connection with what's known as the Corbin Ola. Again, the Corbin Ola is the Corbin means offering, and Ola is the one that just burns, the whole thing gets burnt on the altar. No one eats it. There's none of it that gets consumed. It's all completely burnt, consumed on the altar. So why is this rule about the fire burning mentioned specifically here? So I want to share with you what exactly is the purpose of this particular karban, this particular offering. So the Medrash tells us that the Corbin Ola is intended to atone for, to facilitate the reparation or the correction of what's known as hirhure halev. Hirhure halev are thoughts of the heart, meaning most of the other karbonos, most of the other sacrifices have to do with a particular sin that I did with my actions or maybe with my words. But here, this karban, this particular sacrifice is to atone for or to cleanse me for bad thoughts that I had. It's kind of amazing if you think about it, that the Torah, not only does the Torah expect from us stellar behavior, and speech, which is sterling in nature, but the Torah also demands from us that our thoughts remain pure, that our thoughts remain holy and not negative and not destructive. So, for example, I doubt anybody on this Zoom call has ever experienced this before, but maybe it's possible that someone once had a thought about another person that was judgmental or critical, or maybe you had an inappropriate thought about something that was, inappropriate in nature, or maybe you had a thought of revenge at some point, taking revenge on somebody. These are all hirhure halev. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't say anything bad. I just had bad thoughts. I transgressed in my mind. So the Torah requires us to atone for those types of transgressions. And the way we do that is with the Corbin Toda, with this particular sacrifice. Okay, now, one of the great Hasidic masters gave a really interesting analogy. In Hebrew, we call it a mashal, a mashal. What's the mashal? He said that if imagine a person owned a great forest, massive, gigantic forest, acres and acres and acres. And he decided that he wanted to chop down the forest and build a city in its place. So he sets out to work. One day he chops down a tree. The next day he gets up early, chops down 2 trees. And very quickly he realizes that if he's going to approach this forest this way, a tree or 2 at a time, it's going to take him several lifetimes before he's able to chop down the entire forest and put in its place the city. So what does he do? Sorry. He comes up with an idea. And his idea is that he'll simply set fire to the forest and burn down the whole forest. In a matter of days, the entire forest will be consumed, and then he'll be able to build his city there. So, same thing is, in a sense, true with a Jew, a person who wants to do battle against his hirhure halev, against his negative thoughts. You could say, okay, I'm gonna attack these negative thoughts one at a time. I'm gonna work on not being critical and not being judgmental in my mind. But you know what? That's a battle that is going to take lifetimes to accomplish. And as soon as you eliminate one negative thought, another one pops up in its place. So in order to truly remove all of my hirhure halev, all my negative thoughts, it would take multiple lifetimes. So what's the advice? What am I supposed to do here? How am I supposed to overcome my thoughts of jealousy, my thoughts of inappropriate thoughts in my mind, my judgmental thoughts, my critical thoughts, my thoughts of revenge? So the advice from the holy Hasidic masters is to light a fire inside of yourself, a fire of holiness, an Eish Kodesh, a fire of Torah, a passionate fire of Torah, a passionate fire of davening, a passionate fire of doing mitzvahs. In other words, you should get so excited and passionate and fiery about the positive aspects of your service of Hashem that there won't be any place left for hirhure halev. There won't be any room for negative thoughts, inappropriate thoughts, because you're going to be so excited, you're going to be so lichtig, you're going to be so ignited with holiness and with kedusha from an Eish Kodesh, from a holy fire. So that's the idea of this burning fire that should be burning on the Mizbeach all the time, specifically said in correspondence with this particular sacrifice, because this sacrifice is the one that has to do with negative thoughts. And what's the solution? Don't try to one at a time cut down, chop down, and fell those negative thoughts. That'll never work. It'll take too long. It'll take lifetime after lifetime. Just light a fire of holiness inside of you, a yearning for Torah, a yearning for closeness to Hashem, a yearning for mitzvahs, and that will have the ability to eradicate the negativity from within us. And of course, I'm sure you've thought about this already. This is directly connected to Pesach, because what are we doing on Pesach? On Pesach, we're trying to get rid of our Hallmates. I'm sure that's what Allie's going to talk about a little bit in her workshop. We're trying to get rid of all that negative stuff inside of us, all that foolishness, all that narishkeit, everything that holds us back. So what do? It says in the Mishnah that on the night of the 14th of Nisan, the night before Passover, this year actually we're going to do it 2 nights before Passover because it comes out on Shabbos. But what are we going to do Thursday night this year? We're going to search our homes for Hallmates. Okay? And of course that means you're going to search your home for Hallmates. You're going to look for Cheerios. You're going to look for pieces of crackers. You're going to look for whatever it is, right? But don't stop there. It goes much deeper than that. You're going to search yourself. Churim tzdakim, the crevices, the cracks, the holes inside of me. I'm going to search myself, my inner self for Hallmates. And then what do you do with the Hallmates? It's not enough just to find it. You've got to burn it. You've got to destroy it. How do you destroy it? With a burning fire of holiness, with a passion, with an excitement for our Yiddishkeit, for our investment in our learning, investing in our davening, investing in our mitzvos, and in our growth, and in our closeness to Hashem. And that's how we approach the Hallmates of Pesach also. Okay, that's first point. Next, we talk about the mitzvah. In the Parsha talks about the mitzvah of what's known as Trumas Hadeshin. What is Trumas Hadeshin? Sorry, I went backwards. Trumas Hadeshin. So Trumas Hadeshin, it says in the beginning of the Parsha that the priest, that's the Kohen, what should the Kohen do? He shall dress in his linen garments. These are the fancy, this is the uniform. He puts on the Kohen priestly uniform with linen breeches. This is all part of what he's got to wear when he does his service in the temple next to his body. And he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar and place them beside the altar. Okay. Later, afterwards, he takes off the priestly garments. He takes all the ashes. He removes them outside of the camp and puts them, gets rid of them. But what's this first step? This happens every day. The second part about removing the ashes to outside of the camp, that only happens when the ashes pile up. But every day, the first thing that happens in the temple every morning, the very first part of the daily temple service in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple, was the Kohen puts on his uniform and he goes up on the altar and he takes a little symbolic, just a little amount of the ash, just a little symbolic shovelful of the ash, and he takes it off the altar and he puts it next to the altar. So what is going on over here? Is this just like good janitorial advice? Is the Torah just telling us how to prevent the Holy Temple from becoming a little bit of a pigsty, a daily janitorial guidelines? So that's obviously not what the Torah is into. So, and furthermore, if this were just a matter of tidying up a little bit in the morning and, a little cleanup before we begin today's work, then why is it that only a Kohen can do it? Why does he have to be wearing the priestly garments to do it? And this is the Mishnah tells us that this was one of the most precious, one of the most sought after components of the daily service, so much so that the Kohanim would fight over this. They would fight over the right to do this. And if it's just about cleaning up, why do they just take a little symbolic amount of the ash and why do they put it next to the altar? Take it out. If it's about cleaning it up, take the garbage all the way out. It's like take the garbage out of the bin and bring it to the door, but don't take it outside. So what's going on over here? This is clearly not just about tidying up. So Rav Hirsch has a beautiful explanation over here. Okay, what does he say? He says like this. Rav Hirsch says, it should be apparent then that the Trumas Hadeshin, this process that I've been describing of the Kohen going up on the altar and taking a symbolic bit of the ash and removing it every morning, first thing, is not a physical preparation for the avoda, for the service of the new day. Rather, it's a powerful postscript to that of the day that preceded it. It summarizes the events of the preceding day, Remember that the preceding day, all the sacrifices that were burnt on the altar throughout the night before, telescoping them into a reminder that stands sentry next to the Mizbeach, to the altar, powerfully declaring to those who come to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu that what? Nothing is new today. All that you will do here is a continuation of what has been done in the past. You are to do it with new vigor and enthusiasm, but you need not reinvent the wheel. Your contribution to holiness has been planned and charted out since antiquity. Every Jewish grandchild stands before God with the same mission in life that his ancestors bore. No one needs to innovate to discover anew what Hashem wants of man. You do not have to shoulder the responsibility for solving all the problems in a vacuum. Furthermore, each person's contribution builds on those of who have come before in a long, rich past. The little mound of ash testifies to the continuity of yesterday with the avoda, with the service of today. So that, says Rav Hirsch, is really the purpose of Trumas Hadeshin. It's a taking what we did yesterday, and it's a symbolic way of showing that what we're going to do today is going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same process, but it's going to build little by little, day by day, upon what has taken place before and before and before. And by doing so, we're perpetuating our connection to Hashem and our connection to Judaism, and building a little mound of ash every single day, adding a little bit to that process. Okay. Now we talk about the Corbin Toda, a new Corbin that the Torah tells us about in this week's Parsha, called the Corbin Toda. What is Corbin Toda? What is Toda? Thank you. Toda Rabbah. The Corbin Toda is a thanksgiving offering. It's a korban, it's a sacrifice that's brought in the temple for one of four situations. Basically, four situations where a person was in a dangerous or perhaps life-threatening situation, and they came through that challenge, that difficulty, and they survived. So one is, back in the day, if a person crossed the ocean, okay, if a person travels from Israel to the United States, or a person travels across the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean, if a person traversed a desert, if somebody recovered from a life-threatening illness, or somebody was released from captivity, in one of those four situations, the person was required to take a korban, to take an animal and bring it to the temple or the Mishkan and sacrifice it in a statement of gratitude, hodah, appreciation, todah, to Hashem for the miracles that person experienced. It's called the Corbin Toda. And today, we don't have the Corbin Toda currently, but what we do instead is there's a blessing that we say. It's called benching Gomel, a special blessing that we say at the Torah. On whenever there's a Torah reading day, we can say this bracha. And it's if a person recovers from surgery, if a person traveled across the ocean, they make this bracha. But back in the days of the Beit HaMikdash, when there was a temple, not only did you bring the animal offering, right, this goat or ram or sheep or whatever you brought, but there was also, in attachment with this korban, there were 40 loaves that were brought, 40 loaves, and in addition to the cow or the sheep or the goat or whatever the animal is. And normally, most of the carbonot that were consumed, that were eaten, you were given a period of 2 days to consume everything, after which point everything had to either be consumed or destroyed. The Corbin Toda, this particular Thanksgiving offering, which is a huge amount of food, not only is it an entire, let's say, cow or sheep, but in addition, it's 40 loaves of bread. It had to be consumed in 1 day. And anything that was left over had to be destroyed. Can't leave anything over. So what's the solution? There's only one solution. How am I going to eat an entire cow and 40 loaves of bread in 24 hours? I'm going to invite all my friends over for a barbecue. Okay, so what's the purpose of this korban? The purpose of this korban is gratitude. So the more people, and the laws of this Corbin force me, if you will, into having a party, into having a barbecue, and inviting all my friends out in the backyard and eating 40 loaves and a huge animal. And what's going to happen? People are going to say, hey, what's the celebration? What's the party? What's going on? And you go, oh, you didn't hear? Oh, Began, he traveled across the ocean, or so-and-so survived from a serious illness. And the conversation will all be about the miracles and the nisim that Hashem performed on behalf of this person. And that amplifies and publicizes the miracles and the gratitude that one feels for this Corbin. So this is an amazing thing that we express our gratitude, and we want to share it with as many people as possible. So the Torah forces us almost to have a party, to invite people over to be able to share in our gratitude. Okay, the Corbin Toda. I mentioned the word Toda. Toda means thanks. And it's one Hebrew word that probably most people know. Toda, thank you, Toda Rabbah. It comes from the word lahodot. Lahodot is the verb, the infinitive lahodot. Now, what does lahodot mean? What does lahodot mean? It means to thank, but it also means something else. Modeh. What does modeh mean in addition to thanking? It means
Witness?
to witness. In a sense, it means to witness. It means it's what a witness does. It's a witness is modeh al ha'emet. He admits, right? He's bearing testimony in the sense that he's admitting. It means to admit. If I have to admit to you that I did something wrong, I have to be modelecha. Ani modelecha. I admit to you. So the word lahodos means to thank and to admit. And it's not a coincidence that these two words, the same word means these two things. Because part of saying thank you to somebody, and maybe one of the reasons why saying thank you is not the easiest thing to do in the world, is because to thank somebody else means that in some way I have to admit to them that I need them. I needed you. I'm not independent. I'm not fully the master of my own destiny. In some way, on some level, I needed you for this. I'm not self-sufficient. I'm not okay on my own. I'm not all powerful. And I have to admit that when I'm thanking you for something, I am admitting that I needed you for that. Now, how do we know in Hebrew if to translate it as to thank or to translate it as to admit? So it depends what follows it, what preposition follows it. I don't know if it's a preposition. I just made that up. But it depends on the word that follows it. If you say modeh she, you're admitting. Modeh, I am modeh she that. I am admitting that. Modeh she. Okay? But if you say modeh al, I'm thanking. I'm modeh al, I'm thinking on something, upon something. Okay? So that's what this word means. Now, in the famous blessing, the 18th blessing of the Amidah, we say every day. First, what do we say? We say, Modim anachnu lach, sha'atahu Hashem. First, we admit. The first thing we do is we admit to you that, we admit to you that you are Hashem, our God, the God of our forefathers, forever, rock of our lives. You're the shield of our deliverance in every generation. And after we've admitted that, after we've admitted that our complete and total dependence is upon Hashem, now we say, No delachon sapirti l'secha al. We will give thanks to you and recount your praises for, and then we list off a number of the things that we're thanking Hashem for. So first we have to be modeh she. We have to admit that you are Hashem, you are the all-powerful. And then after we've done that, we can say, No delecha al. We are grateful to, and we're thanking you for the following things. You know, it's interesting when we do the Amidah and the Chazan, the cantor, the one who's leading the davening, does the repetition. So he repeats all the blessings of the Amidah, and we listen carefully and quietly, and we respond, Amen. But there's one blessing that he doesn't say on our behalf. This 18th blessing, when he gets to the 18th blessing, he says, or the one who's leading says, Modim and Akhlach. He says this blessing. And we also, at the same time, say our Modim. We say the blessing of thanks also. It's slightly different, but we're saying it at the same time. And it's interesting. Why can't we let him say it for us? He said all the other blessings on our behalf. Why can't he say this one? And the answer is obvious. When you're thanking Hashem, you can't outsource that. That's got to come from me. I have to thank Hashem. You can't thank Hashem on my behalf. You can ask for things on my behalf, but you can't thank Hashem on my behalf. I have to thank Hashem myself. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, one of the great holy tzaddikim, talk about a Eish Kodesh. This man burned with a fire, a passion of holiness inside of him. He used to daven a very long Shemona Esrei. He used to daven in a meet. When he would say the Amidah, it would take him a long time. So one of his students once had enough chutzpah to ask him, Rebbe, when you're davening, it takes you so long to say the Amidah. What are you asking for? You must be asking for something. Are you praying on behalf of your children and your grandchildren? Are you praying on behalf of your yeshiva? Are you praying on behalf of the Jewish people? What is it that you're praying for that takes so long? He said, actually, I go very, very fast through the first 17 blessings of the Amidah. But when I get to the 18th blessing where I'm thanking Hashem, that's where it takes me forever. I can't say it quickly. I have to think and say every single word and think about the gratitude and stop and think about how grateful I am for everything in my life. So this Modim blessing, this 18th blessing, is perhaps the most important blessing in the entire Amidah because it's the blessing of gratitude. And it corresponds to this Corbin Toda that we used to bring in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. And the Parsha talks about some other things. It talks about different offerings that the Kohanim would bring, grain offerings. It talks about the location of where all these offerings were made. Interesting little side point over here is that the sin offering is made and prepared in the exact same place as all the other offerings. And the reason for that is a sensitivity to the sinner. If his offering were offered in a different place and prepared in a different place, then I would see them over there and I would know, oh, so-and-so must have done something sinful. So it's done in the area where all the other korbanos are brought, we're told in this Parsha. And the reason for that is sensitivity so that nobody will know. Maybe he's bringing a burnt offering. Maybe he's bringing a Thanksgiving offering. You don't want to single the guy out as having committed some form of transgression. And then the Parsha finishes by talking about the 7 days where the Mishkan, this tabernacle, was inaugurated, and how Moshe every morning would set up the Mishkan, and then at the end of the day, he would take it down, the entire thing, every day for 7 days. Quite a feat. I just want to zero in for a minute on one of the other korbanos that's mentioned in the Parsha, and that is a really, really interesting korban, a sacrifice, one of the offerings, one of the animal offerings, called a korban shlomim. And shlomim comes from the word shalom. It's a peace offering. What is a peace offering? What does that mean? And of course, we know that the word shalem doesn't really mean peace. It means shlemut. It means wholeness. It means completeness. It means balance. It means harmony. So what is the korban shlomim? The korban shlomim is very interesting. It's not for a sin. It's not, I don't bring this korban because I did some kind of transgression. It has nothing to do with sin. And unlike the other korbanos, unlike several of the other sacrifices, this one, the person who brings it actually eats it. I mentioned before the Thanksgiving offering. The Thanksgiving offering is a subcategory of this larger category that we're talking about right now called the Korban Shlomim, the peace offering, which is why the person who brings it consumes it. So to all of the peace offerings, all of these offerings that fit into this category, the person who brings it eats it. Part of it, a small part of it is given to the Kohen. The parts that cannot be eaten are burnt on the altar, but the majority of the animal is eaten by me. I consume it. I eat it, which is really fascinating. And the Zohar and the Medrash both say that of all of the karbonos, of all of the sacrifices that are brought, the Corbin Shlomim, this particular one, the one that I'm discussing now, that's not for a sin, and the one that is consumed by the person who brought it, it's the most precious in Hashem's eyes of all the karbonos. So why is it? What is so special about this carbon? There are two ways to approach my relationship with Hashem. Two ways. On Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar. And right after we blow the shofar, we say the following prayer. We say, Hayom Haras Olam. This is the day that the world came into being. Hayom Yamid B'Mishpat Kol Yitzurei Olamim. On this day, we all stand in judgment. What's the judgment? Im Kevanim. I can't sing because my voice is bad. Actually, I can't sing even when my voice isn't worse. Im Kavadim. Are we Kebanim? Are we like Hashem's children? Or are we Ka'avadim? Are we like Hashem's servants? That's what the whole day of Rosh Hashanah can be boiled down to this question. Are we children of Hashem or are we servants of Hashem? What does it mean? Banim, Avadim, children, servants. It's two different perspectives in the way we approach our relationship with Hashem. An Eved, a servant, is somebody who's going to listen to everything his master tells him. If he's smart, he's going to serve his master carefully and perfectly, but he's going to do so out of fear. There's no love involved. He does what he needs to do. He faithfully obeys the commandment of his master, and he does what's demanded of him, but he does so out of fear. Not because he loves his master necessarily, but just because he's afraid of what's going to happen if he doesn't obey. That's an Eved. An Eved is a servant. But there's another level. There's another way to serve Hashem, and that's Kebanim, like children. It's a totally different relationship. What does a child do? The child is filled with love for their parent. They're filled with joy when they have the opportunity, the privilege to serve their parent and to honor them. They want to give nachas to their parents. It's a completely, totally different way of relating to Hashem. On Rosh Hashanah, we're asking ourselves a question. Im kevanim, im kavadim. What are we? How do we relate to Hashem? Do we relate to Hashem as avadim, as the faithful servant who's going to do what's told of him to do because they're afraid of what's going to happen, the fearful servant? Or are we like banim? Do we love Hashem? We want to give him nachas. We want to be close to him. We're so grateful for the privilege of his mitzvos. That's really what this is, what Rosh Hashanah is all about. And the Korban Shlomim, this amazing offering that we bring, is different than all the other korbanos because it has nothing to do with sin. This is not being brought because I transgressed some sin and now I need atonement, like a chatas offering, a sin offering, or a guilt offering, an asham. Those korbanos, those sacrifices that we bring because of a sin, those are being brought like an eved. I did something bad. I transgressed something. I said something I wasn't supposed to do. I looked at something I wasn't supposed to look at. I ate something I wasn't supposed to eat. And I transgressed and I'm going to be punished. And now we've got to bring an offering, a sin offering, a guilt offering. Okay, that's great. But that's an eved. That's relating to Hashem like a servant. But then there's the shlomim, the korban shlomim, the peace offering. I didn't commit any sin, no transgression whatsoever. So why am I bringing it? Because I want to be closer to Hashem. I want to express my gratitude to Hashem, my hakarat hatov, for the blessings that he's filled my life with. I want to recognize the chesed that Hashem does for me. I'm filled with love for Hashem. that Corbin is being brought not like an Eved, not like a servant, but like Banim, like a child who wants to be close to their parent, like a child who's grateful, who feels privileged to be able to be close to their parent, like a child who just wants to give nachas to their parents. So the Corbin Shlomim, this particular Corbin, says the Zohar and the Medrash, is Hashem's most precious of all the Karbonos, which also explains why this particular Korban, this particular sacrifice, is the one that I eat. The other ones I don't eat. If I bring a sin offering, not one morsel of that passes my lips. If I bring a guilt offering, I don't consume or eat any of that. Some of it goes to the Kohen, the rest is burnt on the altar. But this offering, this Corbin Shlomim, I eat it. I get to consume this Corbin Shlomim. Why is that? What's the difference? Why can I eat this one? So think about it. It's a beautiful reason. The other Karbanos, the other sacrifices, the guilt offering, the sin offering, those are being brought like a servant. Does the servant get to eat at the table of the master? Of course not. The servant eats in the servant's quarters. The servant doesn't sit down and enjoy and eat with his master. The servant doesn't sit at the table with the king and eat a meal. But the Corbin Shlomim, the peace offering, included in that is the Corbin Toda, the Thanksgiving offering that I'm bringing. Why? Because I love Hashem. I feel so grateful to Hashem. I want to be closer to Hashem. I want to give nachas to Hashem. That's banim. That's a child. That's like a child. Does the child eat at the table with their parent? Of course the child eats at the table with their parent. They don't eat in a separate room. So while some of the offering is being burnt on the Mizbeach, representing Hashem's consuming part of the Corbin, I'm also simultaneously eating the meat that I am enjoying because I'm bringing this like a son, like a child to the parent. So it's an amazing, amazing idea. There's one more thought I just want to say about the Corbin Shlomim, which I think is fascinating. And that is, I don't know if you know this or not, but I think this is really interesting to point out that when the temple stands, when the temple stood and when the temple will be rebuilt, it's not only Jewish people who are allowed to bring sacrifices in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. Any monotheist, any one person, whether they're Jewish or not, who believes in one God, is allowed to bring a korban to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple. But if a non-Jew brings a korban to the temple, they can only bring a korban olah. They're only able to bring a korban that is fully, completely, entirely consumed on the mizbeach, on the altar. They cannot bring a korban shlomim. They can't bring this peace offering, which is partially consumed by the one who brought it and partially consumed by Hashem on the mizbeach. Why is that? Because the concept of sharing your meal, so to speak, sharing your sacrifice with Hashem, part of it being burnt on the altar that Hashem consumes, part of it being consumed by me, is a uniquely Jewish idea. Okay, because monotheistic non-Jews who believe in God certainly believe in a divine power. They believe in a creator of the universe, but God is up there. He's in heaven. God is in heaven. He's involved in holiness, holy matters. He's involved in miracles. But to the Jews, that's not our view of God. We view God as being down here and up there and everywhere. He's involved in everything, in the most mundane, in the most pedestrian aspects of life. How I speak to somebody else, what I'm wearing, what I'm eating, the most mundane thing. If my milchik spoon fell into my fleshik pot, Hashem is concerned with everything. He's here. He's not just up there. There's a beautiful verse. King David says this in Tehillim. He says, Hashem b'tzion gadol. I'm sure I've shared this with you before. V'ramhu al kol ha'amim. So how would we translate this? We'd say Hashem b'tzion, Hashem, God, in Zion, meaning among the Jewish people, from the way that the Jewish people relate to Hashem, Hashem is Gadol. I'll leave that untranslated for the moment. Okay? Hashem to the Jewish people, for us Jews, Hashem is Gadol. V'ramhu, I'll call ha'amim. When it comes to the other nations, he is exalted. What's the difference between gadol and ram? What's the difference between big, let's say big, and exalted? Okay, so you can say like a tree is gadol. A mountain is really gadol. Stars, right, even though they're higher than the mountains, they're not gadol, they're ram. Ram means it's way up there. It's way, way, way up there. It's really high. It's ram, it's exalted. It's super, super, super high up. You look all the way up, and there it is. But gadol means it starts on the ground, it starts down here, and you look up and it goes high. A tree is gadol because it starts on the ground and you look all the way up and it's big. A mountain is gadol. It starts on the ground and you look all the way up. A star is ram. It's way, way, way up there. Okay? So Hashem b'tzion gadol. From our perspective, from the perspective of a Jew, Hashem is not ram. Hashem is not high up there, exalted, somewhere up way high in the heavens. Hashem is gadol. He's everywhere, from the lowest, from the earth, from the lowest part of the ground to the highest parts of existence. So that's what it means for the Jews. We say Hashem b'tzion gadol. So for us, there's no contradiction whatsoever in the very physical, pressing activity of chowing down burgers and steaks from my Corbin Shlomim and doing something completely, totally spiritual at the same time. There's no incompatibility. I can eat that meat, and that eating of that meat can be the most spiritual thing I could possibly be doing. It's a physical act that I'm elevating to the highest places. From a non-Jewish monotheistic point of view, that's concession. That's giving in to the flesh. That's not the ideal. Hashem is ram. Hashem is exalted. Hashem is not in that steak, in that juicy sirloin that you're eating right now. So for non-Jews, they're allowed to bring karbonos, but they can't bring the kind that you eat or consume. They can only bring the kind that are fully given on the altar, burned on the altar, entirely elevated up to Hashem. Okay, one more point from the Parsha, and then I want to talk about Shabbos Havdalah for a minute. One of the types of karbonos that we've been learning about, one of the sacrifices that we've been learning about for the last 2 weeks, this week and last week, is what's called a chatas. Chatas is a korban. It's a sacrifice that's brought. It's an offering that's brought when a person does a sin, some form of transgression. Bishogeg. Bishogeg in Hebrew means inadvertently, accidentally. So I'll give you an example. Let's say Shabbos morning I wake up and I go outside and I turn on my sprinklers, I water my lawn. Either because I forgot it's Shabbos, I didn't know it was Shabbos, I completely forgot, or because I didn't know that watering my lawn is one of the 39 categories of prohibited work on Shabbos. Either way, whether it's because I forgot it was Shabbos or because I didn't know this act was prohibited on Shabbos, that's called inadvertent sin, inadvertent transgression. And for that, I bring a korban chatas. I bring a sin offering to atone for the sin. But the question that I want to point out over here is that I'm bringing this korban, I'm bringing this sacrifice for atonement. Atonement means something is wrong that needs to be fixed. Something needs to be realigned spiritually. But my question is, I had no idea. I didn't know it was Shabbos. I was in a daze. I woke up, I was exhausted. I wasn't thinking. I was hungover from drinking too much wine or making too many l'chaims on Shabbos. Or I just didn't know. I don't know the laws that well. And I didn't know that watering the lawn was one of the 39 categories of work. So I didn't do anything bad. I just inadvertently transgressed. So why do I need an atonement? Why do I need to be cleansed spiritually? So this question, I like this question because it gets at the very core of what a mitzvah and what the opposite of a mitzvah, let's call it an aveira, a transgression, is all about. So there's really two components to every mitzvah. There's the why do I do a mitzvah? In a few nights from now, Saturday night, I'm going to be eating matzah. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. It is a Torah mitzvah commandment to eat matzah on the night of Pesach. So I'm going to eat matzah. Why? Because Hashem said so. Every mitzvah, every commandment in the Torah, there's two components. Component one is because Hashem said so. He commanded me to do this. Why am I going to eat matzah? Because Hashem commanded me to do it. Fine. But Hashem didn't randomly make up a list of 613 bizarro random acts and tell us to do them or not to do them for some reason. He gets kicks out of it. No. The mitzvahs that he told us to do is because somehow eating that matzah, for example, confers some type of positive benefit onto my soul. It builds my soul. It strengthens my soul. It allows my soul to function. It repairs my soul. It allows it to be healthy and function in an optimal way. So there's two components to a mitzvah. Why I do the mitzvah. One, because Hashem said so. Two, because there's something about that particular action that Hashem, the reason why he told me to do it is because it has some positive effect on my soul and allows me to be able to function optimally in a soulful way. I might not know why. I probably don't know why. I come up with theories, but that's a mitzvah. An aveira, a transgression, is the same thing. Hashem told me 365 things not to do. So using our Passover example, right? Thursday night, we're going to search our homes, get rid of all of our Hallmates. Why? Because the Torah prohibits eating Hallmates on Pesach for a whole week. Hallmates is water that comes into contact with wheat, barley, rye, what are the other two? Oats and
Spelt.
Thank you. Right? That's Hallmates. And I can't eat it for the whole week of Pesach. And not only can I not eat it, the Torah prohibits me from having it in my ownership. Okay? So why do I not do it? Because Hashem said so. Hashem said, don't eat it. There's two components to a transgression. One is Hashem told me not to, and I go ahead and I did it. Okay? And the second reason is because he didn't randomly tell me not to. He told me not to because for some reason, which I may or may not understand, eating this chametz has some negative impact on my neshama, on my soul, and prevents it from being able to achieve and accomplish and radiate and shine in the way that it ideally should. So there's two components to an aveira, two components to a transgression. Why doing it is bad. One is because Hashem told me not to, and two is bad for my soul. Okay? Let me try to clarify this with an example. I've given these examples a million times over the years. Example number one. Everyone has bad moments, weak moments, okay? So I'm walking up at the Chaim Center and I catch a whiff of that city barbecue and it's too much. I can't control myself. Look around, no one's watching. I go in and I order a rack of baby back ribs. I can't control myself, okay? So I'm waiting for my ribs. Little did I know that on that particular day, they ran out of ribs, pork ribs, and they go next door to Jewel and they get some kosher beef ribs and cook them up in a way that almost tastes like the real thing, although we all know that beef ribs will never taste like the real thing. So they cook up the beef ribs and I eat them. Delicious. Okay. Do I need atonement? Do I need kapara? I ate, what did I eat? Totally kosher. Let's assume they were prepared kosher for the sake of the argument. Totally kosher, glatt kosher beef ribs. But the Torah tells me I still need atonement. Why? Because I transgressed the first part of the transgression. Even though I ended up eating something that was kosher, I transgressed the fact that Hashem told me not to. I willfully went in there and ate it thinking that I was eating the pork ribs. Fine. What about the second case? Where I go to the perfectly, completely glatt kosher restaurant and I go in there and I order some beef ribs and they ran out of ribs and they run across the street to the barbecue and they bring back some kosher, non-kosher pork ribs and they prepare them up and I eat them and I'm wondering why these ribs taste much better than they usually do. But what did I do? I ate not kosher. Do I need atonement? Yes. Why? Because my soul ingested and consumed something that was harmful to it. Did I transgress Hashem's commandment? No. I did everything I could. I chose the kosher restaurant, the one that had the best hashgacha and the best reputation of being totally kosher, and that wasn't my fault, and I had no idea. I still need an atonement. Why? Because even though I didn't willfully transgress Hashem's will, but what I did is I actually consumed something. There's a metaphysical reality to eating that thing, which is not kosher, even if I didn't intend to or mean to. So when it comes to this particular korban, the korban chatas, which I bring for inadvertent, unintentional sins, it's because, yeah, it's true. I wasn't rebelling against Hashem when I did this transgression. I wasn't trying to disobey Hashem's will, but in the end of the day, I did this transgression, and there's a metaphysical reality attached to that transgression, and that's what my soul needs atonement for. Okay, let's spend 2 minutes, wrap it up, and talk about Shabbos HaGadol. What is Shabbos HaGadol? Shabbos HaGadol is the Shabbos right before Pesach. Every year, Shabbos before Pesach is called Shabbos HaGadol. And what is it all about? Why is it called Shabbos HaGadol? That's what I want to discuss over here. Second. Okay. So what is Shabbos HaGadol? So the main reason, different reasons are given why this Shabbos is called the Great Shabbos. Shabbos HaGadol. There's that word again. Gadol, big, great. Why is it called the Great Shabbos? So the main reason that's given is in the words of one of the commentators known as the Tur. He says, Lafisha Nase Bo Nes Gadol, because on that particular Shabbos, a Nes Gadol, a big miracle took place. What was that big miracle? So that particular year, the 15th of Nisan fell out on a Thursday. We know that the Corbin Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, is brought the day before Pesach, on the 14th. And we know that you need 4 days to inspect the sacrifice to make sure it has no blemishes before it was brought. So the Jewish people were told on the 10th day of the month of Nisan, which, by the way, was today, which also on that year happened to correspond with Shabbos. They were told to take a lamb into their house, tie it to the doorpost, and keep it there for 4 days of inspection before they would bring it 4 days later as a Corbin Pesach, as a Paschal sacrifice for the holiday of Pesach. So that's what they did. Every single Jew in Egypt, the first, going all the way back, this is right before the Exodus, right before the Jewish people left Egypt. They all took their lambs, brought them in their house, tied them to the doorposts, and kept them there for 4 days. It was Shabbos, and it was the 10th of Nisan. What was the nace? The nace was that the lamb was the Egyptian god. The lamb was the deity in Egypt. One of the main gods in Egypt was a lamb. And the Egyptians were enraged. Unbelievable defiance. They were stunned by this insult that the Jewish people, who had been this wretched slave nation, is now defiantly taking their God and bringing it into their house, tying it to a bedpost, and they're going to slaughter it as a sacrifice to their God. They're going to slaughter our God as a sacrifice to their God. They were insane. They were furious. But they said not a word, not a boo, not a peep. They didn't do anything. They didn't say a single word. And that is what most people consider the Nes Gadol, the great miracle that took place on that particular Shabbos, that the Egyptians stood by as every single Jew brought a lamb, the Egyptian god, into their home to be slaughtered ultimately 4 days later to the Jewish God. But the problem with that explanation, which is the classic typical explanation, is we have a whole Shabbos, we have a whole celebration. Shabbos gets its own name, Shabbos HaGadol, because of this miracle. Yeah, big miracle, not diminishing it, but is it as big of a miracle as the 10 plagues, as the parting of the Red Sea? Right? We don't have a Shabbos Hamakos. We don't have a Shabbos for the plagues. We don't have a Shabbos for the parting of the Red Sea. And somehow we have a Shabbos specifically calling out this one miracle, which was a big miracle, but wasn't as big a miracle as these other ones. Also, another question is, why? This is a strange question. Why do we celebrate this coming year, Shabbos, right? Shabbos is going to be the 13th of Nisan. And we're going to celebrate this miracle, the Shabbos HaGadol miracle, on Shabbos. Why do we celebrate it on the Shabbos before Pesach instead of celebrating it on the day it happened, which would have been today? Why don't we celebrate this great miracle on the 10th of Nisan? That's when it happened. Since when do we round off to the nearest Shabbos? If a holiday falls out on a certain day, we celebrate that holiday on that day. We don't wait for the next upcoming round off to the nearest Shabbos to celebrate the holiday. And yet somehow, when it comes to this holiday of Shabbos HaGadol, the great Shabbos commemorating this miracle, we don't celebrate it on the day it happened, Yud Nisan, which would have been today if we were going to celebrate it on the day of the 10th of Nisan. We wait till Shabbos. So why is that? So I want to just share with you a really interesting thought that I read in a beautiful essay from Rabbi Norman Lamb. Rabbi Norman Lamb was the chancellor of Yeshiva University. Sadly, he passed away this year during the COVID pandemic. I'm pretty sure it was from the virus itself. He was a great, great leader and Jewish thinker, a wonderful, wonderful person. He said something really neat over there. He said, the Nes Gadol, the great miracle, is not what everybody thinks it was. Everyone thinks the Nes Gadol means that there was a great miracle, and that was that the Egyptians stood by silently while the Jewish, enraged and infuriated, but did nothing while the Jewish people took their God to sacrifice to Hashem. That wasn't the Nes. He says the Nes the miracle was the fact that a nation of slaves who had been battered, oppressed, systematically abused for 210 years, somehow found the inner strength, the courage, the character to do this incredible act of defiance. This was the moment for the very first time that the Jewish people stood up and said, we are not your slaves anymore. And to show that, we're going to take your God, your lamb, bring him into our house, tie him up to our posts, and offer them in 4 days as a sacrifice to Hashem. It was an incredible act of defiance and strength and courage. How did they miraculously have the strength and courage to be able to do that? You know, he doesn't make this comparison, but others do, that it's like in 1948. If you think about it, the miracle of is Israel declaring its independence. What was the miracle? The miracle was, maybe this is why we say Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut, on the day of Israeli independence. The miracle was that this group of Holocaust survivors who had come from Europe, who had lost everybody in the war. They were all alone. They had no one backing them. The United States was not behind them. They were surrounded by enemy Arab nations. And somehow, defiantly, they found the strength and the courage to declare independence, to declare themselves an independent nation. It's an amazing, amazing idea. That's the Nes of 1948. That was the Nes, says Rabbi Lamb, of this particular day where they brought the lambs into their house. So what does it mean, Nes Gadol? So in Hebrew, a Gadol, what is a Gadol? When a person becomes a Gadol, that means that in essence, it means they become an adult. And usually we think of that as being 12 or 13, depending on if you're a boy or a girl. But the Talmud says that a katan, a minor, a child, a minor, is someone who's somech al shulchan aviv or shulchan acherim, somebody who depends upon, relies upon the table of his parents or somebody else's table for his survival. He's not independent. He lacks independence. He's not self-sustaining. A gadol, what's a gadol? Yesh lo shulchan shelo. He has his own table. He doesn't rely on anybody. Gadol means he's independent. He's able to be himself. He's able to live to his own destiny, to self-express and to be self-reliant. During the 210 years of slavery, the Jewish people we were katanim. We were not gadolim. We were minors. We were not independent. We were not self-reliant. We were not free to express ourselves spiritually, intellectually, emotionally. And this critical moment, this turning point, this watershed moment of an act of defiance against our oppressors where we took their God to be slaughtered. At that moment, Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, go from being a katan to a gadol. They go from being a child to an adult. They go from being dependent to being independent. That act of courage, that act of self-destiny, made them into a gadol. So when we say on this particular day, a nes gadol took place, don't translate that as nes gadol, a big miracle, a great big miracle. That's not what it means, according to Rabbi Lamb. It means a nes, a miracle, the miracle being that we found the strength to carry out this tremendous act of self-defiance that transformed us, Am Yisrael, from being a katan, a minor, a child, into being a gadol. So a nes gadol means the miracle that transformed us into becoming a nation that is now gadol. We're now a self-reliant and independent nation with courage and with strength, emotionally, spiritually, self-actualized, and self-dependent. So that's just an amazing idea. And when God tells Abraham in the beginning of Genesis, Hashem tells Abraham, I will make you into a goy gadol. I will make you into a nation. Goy means nation, a nation of gadol, a gadol nation. It means, yes, it doesn't mean what it sounds like, because most people translate that as, I'll make you into a great nation, which can mean abundant, but we're not. We're small in number. It can mean mighty. But what does it mean? A goy gadol. It means we're going to be a nation that is going to be gadol, a nation that's going to be genuine, that's going to have genuine greatness of self-independence and self-reliance, not a nation of conformists, not a nation that looks to other nations to know how we want to be in this world, not a nation that's trying to be like everybody else, but we're going to be a nation of independent thinkers, a nation of independent people who can do what's right regardless of what the world around us may tell us is right. And the last point is, why do we celebrate this on Shabbos? Why don't we celebrate on the 10th of Nisan? So I don't know, but maybe it's because somehow it was the power of Shabbos. It was the energy, the spirituality, the holiness of Shabbos, which gave, or at least contributed heavily to the Jewish people being able to find that inner strength, that inner resolve, that wherewithal to commit this act of defiance and bravery and independence, and to stand up against their oppressors after 200 years. So there was something about the Shabbos itself that gave them that power, that gave them that ability to be able to achieve and accomplish that. So maybe that's why we always celebrate it, not on the 10th of Nisan when it happened, but on the Shabbos before Pesach. Okay, my voice is beyond, it has reached its capacity, so I'm going to stop the video